Now in the backswing, you're going to notice some players on the PGA Tour bring the club way outside. Think about like a Matt Wolff. He does a little setup thing and then brings the club out here. If I was to pause the hands when they're about waist high or just a little above that, you're going to see the club way out here somewhere. Now he's one on the PGA Tour. He's pretty daggone good. You take a look at another player, JB Holmes, also a PGA Tour winner. He's going to do something completely different. So when he takes the club back, it comes a little bit more inside. And when you pause the club in the same part of the backswing, his club's way over here. So these two players have their club, the club head, almost 4 feet apart in the backswing. So what gives? Well, it just shows you that there's some things in the golf swing that are preference. What does this have to do with address versus impact? Well, it's probably the most important part of this video. Those are preferences in the golf swing. The things I'm going to be talking to you here are cold, hard facts. You line up every single player that plays on the PGA Tour, and they're going to do what I'm teaching you here absolutely identical. They're going to have the same 3 things in all of their swings, and if you want to hit the ball consistently solid, this is a must-do thing. You have to learn a good impact, or we just won't be able to play great golf. Let's go and get started. All right, so let's jump into the first piece. Let's talk about what the club actually does, because that's the most important. Now, when the club comes in the downswing, we're just talking about impact here, but really from what I call last parallel, the club is going to move identically or virtually identically on every single PGA Tour player. If we're looking at it from down the line, the same thing. This club is coming absolutely identical. So if you lay it over top of one another, 100 PGA Tour players all hitting the same club, almost you'd think it's the same swing over and over. There's small differences, but basically identical. Now, the first piece is shaft lane. So when we set up at address, our club shaft is going to be roughly straight up and down. It's okay to have a little bit of shaft lean. I like to have a little bit of a forward press as I come to address. But at impact, we have to have forward press. So what I mean here is, even if you set up with a club like this, that's totally fine. You'll find guys on the PGA Tour that do that. But every single one of them, when they're coming down to impact, have the shaft not vertical, but leaning in front. You see, tour players are leaning that shaft forward about 30% off of the natural loft. So here's what I mean by that. If I take a 60-degree wedge and the shaft is straight up and down at address, when it gets to impact, I'm going to take about 30% of that loft off. So I'm going to take it from 60 degrees down to 40 degrees. Or essentially, if I keep the leading edge of the club square, the face square to the ball, I'm going to be taking this club from 60 degrees down to 20 degrees of shaft lean to get the loft at 40 degrees at impact. If I take a 7-iron like I have here, it's going to start off at mid-30s loft, depends on the manufacturer, and it's going to lean forward a good 10-12 degrees to get you down to the low to mid-20s. So if you take a 3-iron, 20 degrees of loft, you're only leaning it forward 6-7 degrees. A driver has almost no forward shaft lean, just a tiny, tiny bit at impact. But why are we doing this? Why is it a cold, hard rule that you have to have the hands in front? Can't I just use a longer club or do something different to make it happen? Well, there's 2 reasons. Number one, it's way more consistent. You see, if I get my hands in front of this golf ball at impact, my hands are leading the way, it's so much easier to get the club to come down, hit the ball first, and then the ground in front. So if I set up like this, that's okay. I just have to know when I come to impact, I'm going to be like that. Totally different position. Now, that's important, and you may be asking, okay, I get it. I see all the pros are doing that, but how do I do it? Well, that gets me to the second 2 things. The first one is your hips. Now, most players know that they have to get the hips open at impact, but it doesn't line up with what they're trying to do with the club. You see, if I'm trying to get my club in front of the golf ball at impact, now all of a sudden it makes sense to get those hips open and clearing out of the way. You see, if my hips were closed, so let's go ahead and take it, just imagine there's a club across my hips like this. If they were closed at impact, I could easily throw the club and get it leaning backwards like this, but there's no way, my right arm won't even go far enough to get the club, my hands in front of the golf ball. It's almost impossible. But you'll notice as I open my hips up, look how much easier that gets to lean the shaft forward. So every degree your hips are closed, you're going to get reversed shaft lean. Every degree your hips are forward, you're going to tend to get more and more shaft lean. So I have to clear my hips out of the way. Now, piece number 2, and one of the most important things to address, is it all depends on your swing plane in the downswing. And this is what I tackled in my new course, the 20-minute shallowing fix. But if I'm already steep in the downswing and I open my hips, look at what that club's doing. I'm coming way over the top. I have to get this club shallowed out and from the inside. That way when I clear my hips open, the club's coming squarely from the inside, square through the golf ball at contact. So if you want to get your hips open, you have to be doing those two things right. If you're thinking about coming in steep or you naturally come in steep, we got to get that way more inside if we want to get the hips open. If we're thinking about having our club go back to where it was at address and we want to get our hips open, it's not going to happen. We're going to stall those hips out. We're going to throw the club to make that happen. We need to be thinking about this club being way up here like this. That's the idea I want to have to get the hips open. So way from the inside and then feeling like my shaft is leaning way forward when I'm coming to contact. That's what's going to get your hips open. If we're not trying to do that, they're never going to open up. Now finally, and third is the weight shift. You see at address, my weight is actually favoring my right side. And I'll get to that here in a second, but that's wildly different than at impact. So at address, I'm probably 60% on my right side, 40 on my left. At impact, I'm probably 80% on my left side and 20% on my right. Now again, the same thing. If I shift my weight to the left, it makes it easier to get the hands in front, makes it easier to clear the hips out of the way if I'm doing that. And you may think, well, that's preference. Well, hundreds of PGA Tour players have been measured, thousands of professional players. And what they found using these force plates that are incredibly accurate is that players max out their weight shift to the right early in the backswing. So when a tour player starts to get their weight shift to the right, they're as far on the right side as they're going to get in the entire swing about this point in the backswing. And then they start to go to the left. So a lot of players mistake this. They think, I want my weight on the left at impact. I'm going to start with my weight on the left. Okay, now we're way away from what the tour players are doing. What ends up happening if you do that is you end up staying too far to the left and then falling back to the right. So I want to think of the golf swing as just shifting like this. So just take your foot and lift it up about a ½ inch off the ground right to left like this. And when my right foot hits, think of that as being the backswing. When my left foot hits, think of that being the downswing. So it's going to be this type of a motion that's going to help you to get the rhythm of the backswing and the downswing. So those three things, if you don't do those right, impossible to be incredibly consistent and solid in the golf swing. Now there is one thing that's still left out here. You see, if we do all these things right, we get the hands in front, we clear the hips, we bring the club in just like we talked about, you're going to hit that golf ball a mile to the right. And here's the reason. We've never really been told the right way to square up the face. So if I take my address position here and I just open my body and get into impact position, but I don't move my wrist, so I keep this the same, look how now that face is pointing way to the right. It's wide open. Well, that's because you've been taught to square up the face by doing this. And there's a different way that pros are squaring up the face. I call it the anti-roll method. And I'm going to play a preview of that video here in a second. All you need to do is go ahead and click the card that pops up on your screen. If you don't see that card, don't worry. Go down to the link below in the description and you'll get instant access to it. You see, you have to have that piece to make all this work. Because if I don't know how to use my wrist properly to square up that face, I just hit block after block to the right. And that's an entirely separate topic on itself, and that's exactly what I want to go over with you. Once you learn how to use your wrist the right way, you pair it up with what we talked about today at impact, it all starts to come together. So go ahead, I'm going to play a preview now of the anti-roll method. Click the card or the link down below in the description. I can't wait to show it to you. Let's go ahead and get started. Here's the bottom line. If you've been taught to roll the club in the early downswing, that causes the shaft to get steep. And that steep club causes all your problems. It causes you to hit it way behind the big hitters and way inconsistent with your quality of strikes. So you're in the tall grass and the trees and the hazards all day long. Now the great news is this. There's really only two pieces that you need to know to fix all these problems. The first one is we need to learn the proper way to square up the club face. Instead of rolling the forearms and getting steep, there's another way that the pros do this. Once you learn this right way to square up the club face, then you can shallow out from the inside and everything starts to fit together. Now I'm going to teach you this right now in what I call the anti-roll method. You may also hear this called the motorcycle move or the tour twist, but let's walk through exactly how to do that. Now what I want you to do is go ahead and go kind of in the last parallel in the downswing. So here, I want my hips to go ahead and be opening up. I want my club to be parallel with the ground, and I want my hands to be in front of my right thigh. Now, when I take my grip, you're going to notice that when I do this, the club face is basically straight up and down. So if I'm looking at it from this angle, you'll see the face is straight up and down, and my logo of my glove is pointed out in front of me. Now from there,